My name is Anna Korhonen, and I'm very happy to welcome all of you in the audience and today's speakers to this session of Aleksanteri Alumni Talks. And as speakers, in addition to Olga Gurova, just today we got a bonus speaker joining in, Tatiana, who is Olga's co-author on an article that today's talk is based on. And the talk itself is titled Cultural Branding Meets Feminism in Russia, Reebok's Be More Human campaign. And after the presentation, we'll hear comments by Olga Dolbish, and then we'll move on to Q&A, where you can either raise your hand and ask to pose the question yourself, or you can send your questions in the chat. But before we begin, let me just very briefly introduce our speakers. So Olga Gurova is currently an associate professor in consumption studies at Aalborg University in Denmark, and her research interests are consumption studies, fashion entrepreneurship, sustainability, as well as qualitative research methods. And Olga is the author of, among obviously other publications, of two books titled Fashion and the Consumer Revolution in Contemporary Russia, and a book written in Russian, Soviet Underwear Between Ideology and Everyday Life. And Tatiana Romashko is PhD candidate in cultural policy at the University of Jyväskylä, and her research interests are, for instance, politics of Russian cultural policy, cross-border cooperation, post-structural discourse theory, and governance. And Olga Dolbish is postdoctoral researcher here at the Aleksanteri Institute, and her research is at the intersection of media studies, economic sociology, and political economy, and focusing on media markets in Russia, currently focusing on hyperlocal media in Russia, and looking at how internet and digital technologies affect regional and local media landscape. And Olga also coordinates online talks on Russian media, which is a collaborative initiative between Russian Media Lab Network and Tampere Research Center for Russian and Chinese Media. I suppose these talks will also continue after a summer break, right, Olga?
Yes, definitely. Thank you very much for the introduction.
Okay, and so as you see, the talk is now being recorded. The comments will not be recorded and the discussion will not be recorded. And so we're all set. So Olga, please, the floor is yours.
Mm-hmm. First of all, thank you very much, Anna, for inviting me, us, to present here at the Aleksanteri Alumni Talk. That's so nice to be sort of back, at least to talk to the people from the Aleksanteri Institute. And we would like, and of course, I'm grateful to my colleague Tatiana Romashko, who is joining us today. And thank you everyone who came to talk to us and to listen to our presentation and to discuss it. So our topic, the topic of our presentation is called Cultural Branding Meets Feminism in Russia, Reebok's Be More Human campaign. And yes, the authors, it's an article that we are working on together with Tatiana Romashko. So I have to say that it is a work in progress, and it's also a part of a bigger project of mine on social media firestorms. But let's start. So we are going to talk about a campaign that is a campaign of a global, or well, it's an American company, but it's also a global company, transnational company, Reebok. And the campaign was launched back in 2015 in the American market. And here you can see the one of the images from that campaign, and the images appeared on the sort of I don't know, second wave of relaunching of that campaign in 2018 under the hashtag Be More Human. And on that image, you can see one of the slogans of that campaign: never apologize for being strong. So this is a campaign that was launched in the American market back in 2018, but then it was also adopted on the Russian market in 2019. And here you can see several examples of images with the commercials from the Russian market, and you also see the translations. And there are the slogans. They address certain stereotypes that exist in Russian culture. And one of the slogans and in particular, it's the slide in the middle on the lower level, on the lower row. Stop sitting on the needle of men's approval, start sitting on men's face. That caused huge online firestorm and heated debates. And so when debates started, and the campaign, the company, the Reebok company, they decided to take out the advertising campaign, take out all of the images from their Instagram account. But then in a few days, they returned the images. So they didn't stay behind the campaign. And we are going to talk about that campaign today. We are going to discuss it today. And we are collaborating with Tatiana, and but basically the research, it belongs to three fields. You can say that it's either disciplinary field or theoretical field, and it's consumer culture theory. That's a branch of marketing and consumption studies. Then gender studies and feminist theory. That's the second pillar, second branch, second area. And the third one is post-structuralist discourse theory. So this is closer to media studies, but of course it transgresses the boundary of the disciplines. The goal of our research and the goal of this paper, that article, is to utilize post-structuralist discourse theory, consumer culture theory concepts, and feminist theory to contribute to an understanding of an ad campaign of a global brand on a national market, or on two national markets, Russian and American, and the phenomena of online firestorm that it caused. So that's our goal. And I would like to start with the main concepts that we are using and to unfold them a little bit. So when we are thinking about that campaign, and that campaign is an example of what is called in marketing cultural branding. And cultural branding is a particular strategy. It's a powerful myth-making branding strategy, conveying the brand's position on deeper socio-cultural concerns and society's most intense anxieties. So basically, when the brand wants to become an iconic brand, the brand has to build the mythology, and that mythology has to be based on certain problems that are really important or significant for the society, and that's called cultural branding. But because those issues, they're often sort of ambivalent, and there are different sides and different opinions on the issue, then online firestorms can happen. And this is what happened with our case as well. So we can talk about social media firestorms or online firestorms, which is a sudden discharge of large quantities of online messages containing negative word of mouth and complaint behavior against a person, company, or group in social media networks. I have to say here that it's not only negative messages, but of course positive messages as well, because different sides can be involved, people who support and people who oppose.
And I'm jumping in. So I'm presenting this slide, how and why we use post-structural discourse theory in this case. So our aim was to use an analytical concepts of post-structural discourse theory in order to analyze a phenomena of cultural branding as well as social media storms from a discursive perspective. And in post-structural discourse theory, discourse states for a system of representation where all the meanings and meaningful practices are produced within the rules and norms of a specific historical, or sometimes it is called a political formation. And hegemony, the concept which we are using in our analysis, states for a historical or a political movement when all the social norms, identities, not all, but the dominant power relations, behavior practices, and attitudes are not questioned by the public, and they are accepted and acknowledged as something which is kind of as a regime of truth, as Michel Foucault would say. So in our analysis, we rely on hegemonic articulations, which predetermine or fix subject positions of an individual, or it might be a group, or even the phenomena through a specific lenses of nodal points or points that captures, which are fixed within the existing power regime or dominant meaningful system. But nevertheless, post-structural discourse theory, and it's very important in our stance, acknowledge that all meanings as well as meaningful systems are contingent. So they are vulnerable for subversion, for change, interpolation, and so on. So this sort of cultural contingency is associated with the changing political projects and effects of modernity, which in post-structural discourse theory are understood as driving hegemonic forces which drive this change. And we see this theoretical approach is compatible with gender theory advocated by Judith Butler and her account of gender identity. So gender identity, as any identity, is understood as informed by contingent practices, individualized practices within the specific culture, and understood as constructed by discourses or structures of social determinism or this specific regime of truth, what identity is and how it should be treated. So from Judith Butler's perspective, feminism as a movement, as intellectual and action movement should explore and challenge practices or totalizing practices of masculine signified economy and also various structures of women's oppression and objectification within the such things as woman as a feminine object, woman as a mother, within the structures of sexuality and morality. And in our research, we make a distinction between feminism and post-feminism, relying on post-feminist and feminist studies. And we take post-feminism as a movement which empower women through consumerism and through promotion and branding, which basically are elements of neoliberal and capitalist society, where the feminism in our work states for second wave feminism, which struggles with these structural oppressions and masculinist economy. So in our case, we try to utilize methods associated with post-structural discourse theory, and we take social media storm or conflict which appeared online as a form of social antagonism that splits society in two groups. That's why we have like two groups in our analysis. And we acknowledge two different ways of discourse formation within those groups. So we define the antagonistic discourse, and antagonistic discourse usually tends to grab specific identity of the opponent or the other and make it negative, make it an enemy in order to deprive it from their political agency, to devolve its voice within the discussion, and so on. While the agonistic discourse tends to subvert the existing hegemony, usually through the logic of differences, so like extending the field or the meaningful field within the new determination, within the new concepts, within the new signifiers. And usually it uses such strategies as a humor and satire. So the main thing is to acknowledge that antagonistic discourse doesn't make negative reference about the nature of the opponent and treat it as equal.
That was agonistic discourse. That one doesn't create an enemy, whereas the first one, antagonistic, it does create an enemy. So that's the main difference. And talking about data sources, we have used images from the American Be More Human ad campaign. We have also used images from the Russian Out of the Boundaries, and that's the hashtag that the campaign was accompanied with so the Russian campaign, but we also used discussions around the Russian ad campaign. We used top 20 links that returned by Google search when we used the hashtags as the key terms for search, but we also used additional materials collected according to theoretical sampling. So just to fill out, that would help us to answer our problem formulation, our research question. And those were the interviews with Zalina Marshenkulova. She's one of the key figures, and we'll mention that further. Also interview with Alexander Galafast, who is the author of that whole campaign. And Zalina Marshenkulova, she was the figure who was featured. And also her agency implemented that, created that campaign. She was a subcontractor. And then we also used YouTube video, perverse Reebok ad caused a humongous scandal. And that's a video that was featured on the Russia 24 channel. And we also used comments below this video. So that's our data sources.
Which is state channel.
State channel, yeah, state propaganda channel. So here you can see the steps of discourse analysis. So we took that post-structuralist discourse theory, which is a version of discourse analysis, and then we dropped it into certain steps, smaller steps, and there you can see the steps. So first we identified an event, and in our case it was social media firestorms, that particular one. Then we identified an antagonism and agonism, so the strategies, the discourses that Tanya just talked about. Then we located nodal points within those discourses, and then we compared the meanings of those nodal points in different discourses. And after that, we identified the elements and moments, and this is something that is also defined within the post-structuralist discourse theory. So this is the categories that are attached to the nodal points and that can be explained by those nodal points. And those categories, the elements and moments, they can be fixed, they're called moments, and they can be unfixed, they're called elements. They're also building the chains of equivalence. And those chains of equivalence, they can have two logics. So either logics of difference or logics of equivalence. Then we defined hegemonic articulation, and then we try to explain that whole chains of equivalence by the literature, by using the literature in the field. And here you can see that's the main image that caused the scandal. So that's Zalina Marshenkulova, and she's the owner, and she's the author of the Telegram channel that is called Women's Power. And she's she self-identifies, she identifies as a feminist. And here's the slogan or the sentence that caused the online firestorm: "Stop sitting on the needle of men's approval, start sitting on man's face." And once the firestorm began, and it was back in February 2019, so there were two groups. We could identify two groups according to the framework of our analysis. So one group was the so-called pro group, so the group who supported Zalina and
who reacted neutral.
Or reacted neutral to the campaign, and another group is the group that was against, so they reacted critically. And here we'll start that we identified, when we started analyzing those discussions, we identified three contested nodal points. So basically the categories that have become, well, we can say that the arenas for debates, and those categories are sexuality, gender, and feminism. And we are going to talk about them a little bit further. And now you see the analysis itself. It can be, the slide can be a little bit heavy on text, but it's quite easy to understand. So we have three main categories, nodal points that we are analyzing. It's gender, sexuality, and feminism. And within each nodal point, we have those chains of equivalence. And those chains of equivalence, they're built based on the moments, on the categories that are coming from the quotes. And here, when the conversation is about gender, within the against group, so the group who criticized the advertising campaign, that group which belongs to that antagonistic discourse. So they were talking about the fact that, here we see a strong woman, but here we also see the fight between man and woman. And this is something that is against the God and nature. And you can see the examples of the quotes. So that's the perverse ad. It encourages women and men to fight, but they must collaborate, and they're different and shaped this way by God or by the creator. And that's an example of essentialist approach to gender, or some may call it strong essentialist approach to gender. So the next nodal point is sexuality, and here the moments that we have identified is women's pleasure, women's dominance, which is equal to humiliation of men. And in the quotes that you can see also on the right, so that you can conclude that women is typically seen as an object rather than subject of sexual pleasure in those comments. But also women's sexuality in general is seen not as a public topic. So this is not something that we shall talk about on federal TV or in relation to sports or at all. So the third nodal point is feminism, and here you can see again the chain of equivalence. It was called homegrown feminism. It was also associated with the bad taste and vulgarity. There are lots of comments that commercial is an example of bad taste, vulgarity, and that's a public offense. And when we are looking at that particular chain of equivalence, I think in that what's happening here, so what that people imply, so they're depoliticizing feminism, shifting attention from political agenda to some judgment of taste. So, you know, the advertising is tasteless. And this is something that is related to class. So basically people who are saying that, taking that position, they are shifting the attention from political agenda of feminism towards class. And it's interesting that those quotes are coming from Russian feminists as well. So that was about the against group, and this is the antagonistic discourse. But this is the next one is a pro-discourse. Tanya?
Yeah, so while antagonistic discourse try to fix a specific understanding of gender, sexuality, and feminism through specific chains of equivalence, like reproduced and recited many times, we didn't see the same phenomena in agonistic or pro-group. And the pro-group was not only those who supported Zalina or said like, well done, Zalina, but also those people who just said, well, I don't see anything abusive in this advertising, or those who just reproduce the discourse within specific memes or images which they put in the context of this advertising. So what we see here, to be consistent with the previous step of analysis, we also took these nodal points and decided to look what is happening to them. So we also refer to gender, sexuality, and feminism. So we find out that basically this campaign, as the authors of the campaign, Golofast and Zalina Mershenkulova claim, was a liberating or emancipating campaign not only for women, but also for men. So gender is understood as something non-essential and which is only belongs to the personal matters, and also it advocates this emancipational force for both genders, not only for women. Sexuality as well understood as in the context of ubiquitous social objectification in Russian society through the advertising campaigns. So the attempt of the feminist campaign or feminist message was to put forward the subjectivity of woman's subjectivity, her sexual subjectivity, and to criticize a woman, objectification of woman and her sexuality in the public discourse. And as well, the third contested nodal point, feminism was mentioned in the pro-group rhetoric, as well as Zalina herself, she claims that this message was a basic, like basics or feminism for beginners, just to understand how woman is treated in the Russian society. And she distinguishes between the feminism and post-feminism, saying that, well, post-feminism in American advertising as well as in Russian advertising, it is something toothless which doesn't work for the Russian society. Russian society won't wake up, so we have to apply some shock tactic or radical feminism. So any feminism is justified in this agonistic discursive dimension.
So if we are comparing the two ads, the American one, the two campaigns, the American campaign and the Russian campaign, as Tanya just mentioned, post-feminism, that's what matters. That's what shall be taken as one of the frameworks for the explanation, because the American ad, if we look at all of the slogans there, the American campaign represents for post-feminism. And so in the core of post-feminism is individualism, autonomy, choice, and agency. And that's why you see all of those slogans, such as unleash your power, never apologize for being strong. But post-feminism, this is a phenomenon, well, it's quite popular in popular culture, in the American, in European popular culture. And post-feminism was criticized for undoing feminism. It was also criticized for losing its critical stance and for commodification of feminist values. So this is something that is, basically lots of critics that are questioning its power, its political power. And we also argue that post-feminism is rooted in liberal hegemony and wouldn't be efficient in Russian context, because in Russia we have a different hegemony, and the hegemony that we are having in Russia.
Yeah, so, and it's also, in our opinion, to take into account the constitutive outside of this feminist message. And the thing is that in Soviet and post-Soviet society, feminism developed in a very distinctive way. So in the Soviet Union, women's emancipation brought this gender equality, but society stayed patriarchal, and this patriarchal order just intensified after 2012, when conservative hegemony was established, and specific trope or nodal point of traditional values was defined as something which should outline our the politics and the governmentality of the Russian society. So the trope of traditional values become a specific nodal point through which gender identities, especially woman identities, is understood nowadays in Russia. And woman was subjected to heterosexual relations, and it become a subject of orthodox morality. At the same time, we can see that traditional values reinforced practices of patriarchal domination and masculinity and popular misogyny that objectify women's sexuality and deprives a woman of her agency. And this is some examples which exist in Russian advertisement, where you can see illustrative objectification, sexual objectification of women in the advertisement of food, some car services, TV channel, and so on.
Mm-hmm. And so we have made that analysis of the campaigns. It's just here we can have, we would like to share some implications for marketing. So the ad campaign is in fact was successful in terms of social media response because the campaign became viral and it produced lots of memes. The campaign also attracted younger people and brought feminist ideas to a broader audience. So that was also a success. But then interestingly, that the corporation didn't stay behind the ad, so the Reebok itself, and it could jeopardize its credibility. But at the same time, the campaign added value to Zalina Marshenkova's personal brand. So she definitely won in the same way as the crowd culture of feminism. They also won. And this is something that cultural branding it can offer to the crowd cultures that that offers the value offers the value that are used in the cultural branding campaigns. Interestingly, only 25% of comments in the internet were negative, while the rest of the audience was supportive, made jokes and created memes, which means that agonistic discourse prevailed rather than antagonistic discourse that is equal to the official propaganda. But in conclusion, we would like to say that online firestorms can be explained as a form of social antagonism that reveals the collision of hegemonic and subversive forces. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is that hegemonic articulations attempts to redefine the meaning and or negate the feminist message with the traditional values. And that's what was happening in the campaign. But at the same time, we have subversive articulation that extend the meaningful field of a conflictual space, making it neutral and viral. And this is what Zalina have been doing, and Aleksanteri Golovast. So people who supported the campaign. So so they sort of neutralize the antagonist discourse. What brands could take out from our analysis is that while they are doing, while they're coming to a different context, to a new context, to a new cultural context, or to a new market, if they're doing some campaigns that are linked to gender, for instance, they have to take into account the non-essential character of contingent character of gender identity, as well as the feminism. This should be taken into account. Yes, when a multinational company enters a national market. One interesting finding that we see that while American campaign adheres to cultural orthodoxy, the Russian one opposes the hegemony and appeals to a crowd culture. So that's basically, if we are looking at the American campaign, their line is or their mottos, the idea is in line with the dominant values with the hegemony, with the feminism. So it's
with the liberal hegemony.
Liberal hegemony, yeah. Whereas the Russian one, we can say that it appeals to the crowd culture, to the feminist value, and in that sense, it opposes the hegemony, so the traditional values and the illiberal hegemony.
That's why it produced this kind of social antagonism, which resulted in media firestorm.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. So thank you very much for your attention. We are right now stop sharing the screen, and so back